And welcome to the Starting 11. I am Will West. That's Chris Carroll. What we do is give you the top 11 topics in the world of soccer every Monday afternoon. Spent years doing this on sports radio. We've now brought the show to YouTube, and we could not be more excited. Chris, how are you today, sir?
I'm great, thanks, Will. How are you doing, mate?
Doing fantastic, And here's how the show works. Top 11 points in the world of soccer every single Monday afternoon. We'll go live about 3:05 on Monday afternoon from here. Like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Or don't. I'm not your dad. All right. Point number one, Chris, let's get right to it. Manchester United jumps into the top four after 3 league wins since Christmas. Has Erik ten Hag and his team turned the corner?
I'm not sure they turned the corner. They're turning the corner, and he's taking them the right way. He seems to be getting respect amongst the players, and they're not there yet. But I think down to the competition that they've got, there's no one really hitting a real patch of form, and consistency, other than Man City and Arsenal at the moment. So compared to those around them, Man United are doing just fine. So they're going the right way. It looks like they've got a bit of a spine back in their team with Casemiro they've got as a defensive midfield player, Martinez at the back, Rashford's hitting some form, and someone saw Fernandes smile the other day. So everything must be okay. He's going well.
I think that they are improving. They've taken steps. I'm not going to say they've turned the corner yet. Part of that is the 3 teams that they've beaten, at least 2 of them probably are likely to be relegated this year. I'll leave your Wolves out of that, Chris. But if you look at the teams they've beaten, add their salaries together, the combined salaries of the 3 teams, it's less than half of what Manchester United's is. What's happened is this is an incredibly talented team that lacked discipline. So him sending off Ronaldo, right move. Him benching Rashford, right move. I think it even helped that he made Bruno Fernandes have to play out of position, saying it's to help the team, just to let people know, okay, this is where the buck stops. It stops with me. So Erik ten Hag has done a good job just riding the ship. I'm not going to say they've turned the corner, but they're heading to the right direction. Let's see where they go when they play, some of the top teams. Can they stay in the top 4 when the schedule gets a little more difficult? And can this group of players, which we've seen through the last 3 managers now with some of these players, really 4, they're not the most disciplined dudes in the entire world. And used to, we could say you were young, right? Now we're at the point where you should be in the prime of your career or beginning the prime of your career. And maybe you're just a malcontent player that isn't worth it. So if Erik ten Hag can't get this out of them, we saw Ole Gunnar Solskjaer couldn't get it out of him. Jose, issues there as well. I want to see this team against better competition, hold their own and do their thing. And if they take a couple of losses, not revert back to old bad habits where you're showing up late to meetings and you're out partying all night.
Yeah, you're right there. And it does look like, you say he's righting the ship, and there's been a lot of ship to right. And Rashford is a great example of where he seems to be. Ten Hag, what he does have, and a few have come in and tried to do it, and you can imagine the players going, okay, here's the next one in the door. What's he got? And let's see if we can hold out a little bit. Let's test him a little bit. And, Rashford, he was late for a meeting. He benched him. Unfortunately, it was against Wolves, so it was only half the game. He benched him for, and he comes on and scores the winner. But it obviously had an effect on him. Rashford's playing well again. Some of the senior pros, they're having to step in line as well. And it looks like they're getting that spine. Like I say, that spine back together. They're getting some fighters in the team, so a bit of fight who'll dog it out. And yeah, it looks like you say he's turning the corner. And compared to those around him, they're getting a bit of form. It remains to be seen what, as you say, when they play against the top 6 teams, see if they do as well as they have lately.
All right, so let me ask you this. Do you think this has been the problem? Has it just been a discipline issue with United all these years, last half decade or so, that we've seen them underachieve? Because they've had far higher payrolls than any other team in the EPL for a really long time. Do you think that it's just been an issue of discipline over the years, or do you think it's spending money on players who weren't worth it? What has been your read on United?
Yeah, I think if you had to pick one thing, look, all these guys can play. All these players, any player in the Premier League, they're great soccer players. They've had to work and prove themselves and go through the leagues and go through academies and rise to the top against a lot of other players who are of similar ability. So they can all play. Once you get to this level, it's down to the psychology of the game and the blend in the changing room, the coach, all the coaches can coach. All the coaches that they've had through, they've all had experience. Solskjaer less so because of his management experience, but he's played at the absolute top level. So they're not dummies that are coming in trying to coach them. But if the players want to dig their heels in, or if they just don't get the coach, then they won't try their best. And I think now this guy's getting some respect.
Point number 2, Chris. Christian Pulisic going to miss weeks for Chelsea, according to Graham Potter, with a knee injury this time. A lot of injuries for Christian Pulisic the last few years. Will his career be derailed by injury? Is he just a guy that's never going to reach his potential because of all of the injury issues?
It looks like that, doesn't it? I feel for the guy because he obviously keeps. He's a great player. I love watching him. Potentially, whenever he comes back and he's on TV, he's a good player to watch. He gets you on the edge of his seat because he tries things, and I like watching players like that. Some players just are injury prone, and he's not the biggest guy, but he's not on his own there in the soccer world. But he just looks like he's prone. He's missed something like, if you add it all up, 60 odd games in the last 6 years. He's missed two seasons in the last 6 years by being injured, and you've got to think that he's been looked after because of his record. You've got to think that the medical staff and the training staff are bearing that in mind and watching his workload, etc., etc. I don't know if he's coming back too early from injuries or what, but I mean, they seem different as well. There was a pelvic injury he got in the World Cup. Now it's a knee injury he got the other day, and he's going to be out for some weeks. So, yeah, it's a real shame. I just hope, you just hope maybe the Premier League's a little bit too physical for him. Maybe he'll do better in the Spanish league where it's a little bit more or less physical, let's say.
All right, so if you look at Pulisic over the last few years, 14 matches lost last season, 11 the season before that, 14 the year before that, 11 in his final year at Dortmund. He is what he is. I think that's what you could say about Christian Pulisic is he's a really good player and he is injury prone. And you mentioned it. Some guys are just injury prone players. He looks a lot smaller than he's listed at. He's listed at 5'10", 150, which is about the same size as Sadio Mane, right? He looks a lot smaller than Sadio Mane out there. He looks smaller than Mo Salah. He's about the same size. He gets 5 pounds lighter than Mo Salah at about the same height. A good bit smaller than Son, playing a similar position, playing that left wing position. I just wonder, because I think Raheem Sterling kind of has a reputation that he's a guy that's injury prone. He's missed less than half of the games per year that Pulisic's missed at this point in his career. But I wonder, is that the position or the situation that Pulisic's going to have to play in if he's going to stay in England? Like you mentioned, maybe he's better off for Germany. Maybe he's better off going to Spain or something like that. But I wonder if he's just going to have to be a 65th minute sub that comes in and changes things for you. He's not as good of a player as Raheem Sterling. He's a really good player. Raheem Sterling can be a great player. I don't know that Pulisic can ever be a great player, but he's a very good player. And I wonder if, whether it's Chelsea or the next club, if they end up selling him this summer, like so many rumors out there are saying that they're going to, I can't help but wonder, Chris, if they'll have to use him in the way that teams have used Raheem Sterling in the past, where 70th minute, here he comes, and he's gonna provide a spark for you, or something like that.
Yeah, either less time or he can change his game. He can adapt. If you look at Kante of Chelsea, who is injured at the moment, but he's not injury prone, one of the best midfield players in the world. He's tiny compared to the rest of his players. He wins the ball and just gives it, gives it. And yes, he's making the tackles rather than being tackled. And I think if Pulisic did a little bit more of that, rather than inviting with another touch and another touch, inviting these defenders to come and clean him out, I think maybe if he adapts his game that way, he could be just as effective. He can see a pass. If he just wins it and gives it and doesn't cuts down on his dribbling and taking those risks of that extra touch, yeah, it takes away from his game. But I think he could, perhaps it might be a way for him to be a bit smarter and to keep playing.
Point number 3, Chris, EPL, I guess the European transfer window is open right now. Who will be the biggest buyer in the EPL during this window?
Hard to say at the moment, isn't it? I mean, my heart bleeds for the top 6. They always need more players. They've spent absolutely millions and millions every summer, every transfer window, and yet they still need someone else. And and so it goes on. Liverpool just picked up Gakpo from under the noses of Man United. They I mean, look at the strength that Liverpool have got up front. They need another forward, so they've got another forward. Now Van Dijk's gone down. They're going to need cover from him, and they weren't expecting that. So they're going to have to do a bit more shopping, I think, Liverpool, although they claim that they've got no money, but they always find a bit from somewhere. I don't know where they magic it from. Manchester United, they're crowing on that they need another forward as well. You look at them. Chelsea, it's like a who's who of soccer. Their squad, but it's half of them are on the injury table. So I could see them needing to splash out as well. At the moment, for me, it looks like the biggest spenders. If you've got to pin me down, it's going to have to be Chelsea now, because they're in the right spot and they've got to get out of they're in trouble, basically. Well, in trouble for Chelsea. I mean, they're not going down anywhere, but heaven forbid, they're 10th at the moment. So looks like if they want to turn their season around, they're going to have to spend some money.
I think it has to be Chelsea as well. And part of that's the injuries too. The new owner, and it was kind of flew under the radar, at least in the States. Maybe it was a bigger deal in England, but here in the States, it flew under the radar that the new owner kind of made himself the head of football ops. That Jerry Jones, Dallas Cowboys, that's what this guy did when he bought that team. And he had the people that were in charge of football ops operations that, they resigned the club and left. He named himself the head of operations and went and spent over $200 million and wasted money on Aubameyang and took a couple of other guys. It's just not worked out. So now what he's going to have to do, he's stepped aside. He's brought in football people to run this thing. And he's also going to have to give them money to make this work. It's either that or you blow Graham Potter out. Those are your two options. And you say the problem was Graham Potter doesn't necessarily fit with the pieces that we built around Thomas Tuchel's system. We already spent over 200 million pounds bringing in other guys that haven't worked either. So I think it has to be Chelsea. They have to spend money, but especially if you're going to hire new people to run your operation side, you have to be able to allow them to bring in players to fix your mistakes if you're the owner. And he seems willing to do that. So I think Chelsea's number one there. The number two option, I'll throw in another one that's kind of a dark horse that no one's talking about. And they don't have Chelsea money, United money, Liverpool money. Everton has to do something, right? Like you're Everton, you can't get relegated. You're Everton, for gosh sakes. You can't be down in the championship right now. And if you look at Everton, here's the low-key most interesting stat in the EPL, in my opinion, Chris. Jordan Pickford is tied for second in assists at Chelsea right now on the season.
That's a great statistic.
That's
a great one, Will.
You cannot survive with that being the case. And you know how many assists Jordan Pickford has? 1. So I look at Chelsea right now, and there's just nobody creating for them. And they've spent money on players that just flat don't work. I don't know if I necessarily believe in the managerial situation there either, but Everton has problems that they have to fix. And I know that's not a big club, but you have to spend money during this window to make sure you don't get relegated, because you're Everton. This isn't Bournemouth. This isn't Norwich. Nothing against those clubs. Of course, they want to stay up. But if they go under, it's not the end of the world. At Everton, you're way too big of a club for you to go under. And so, and to be relegated. So they have to spend money, in my opinion. What your thoughts on Everton, or is there another club bottom half of the table you think could spend money to try to make sure they don't get relegated?
No, I think you're right. And the size of the club and the tradition that Everton has, you'd think they've got to do that. But Everton, if you speak to Evertonians, they'll tell you they've spent millions and millions. They'll tell you how many, like $500 million in the last couple of 3 years to improve their team. They just can't do it. They've tried. They've had the best coaches in the world. So the problem they got now, it looks like they're a contender for going down, is attracting a decent player to join a club who may go down at the end of the season. So you're in it there. You can't win, to be honest with you. So Lampard's got to get the best of what he's got, I think, and maybe, I mean, if you're looking at a transfer, you're not looking at top-end transfers to go to Everton. You're hoping for a $10-15 million player to come in and hopefully blend in.
Point number 4, Chris, will we see a big-name player move during this window?
January, less likely. I think the biggest name we got is the Shakhtar Donetsk winger Mudryk, and it looks like he's going to Arsenal, which would be good for them because they struggle on the depth. They're playing some great stuff, Arsenal, but they're struggling with the depth of their squad. The rest, big names, I think they'll hang around and wait till the end of the season, which generally happens. Like sorry to bring him up, but you're Kane. We'll see. We'll see where he goes at the end of the season, if indeed he does go anywhere. But But no, I think it's going to be, like I mentioned before, really a 15, 20, $25 million players kind of moving around. Names you haven't heard of, but if you pick the right guys, they can make a big difference to your team. But you got to pick those carefully. You got to do your homework on them. But yeah, Arsenal look like they've got the cherry there, and Man United, Liverpool with Gakpo, they've got a good buy there too.
What about Felix? Is that a big enough name? And that's 80 million pounds or so, 80 million euros that they're talking about throwing around. Because I think that's a pretty big pickup for someone. And if Chelsea really does, I think the Sun said, I haven't looked at this in probably since about 1 o'clock, but the Sun said as of about 1 o'clock today that Felix was not going to go to Arsenal. We're looking at him and United and a couple of other teams, that it looks like Chelsea's the place that he's going to go. That's as big of a name as I think we're going to see, because I don't think we see McKennie change hands. I don't think we see Bellingham leave Germany during this window. What about Enzo Fernandez? That's the World Cup hero. That's the one name that I wonder about, because he's told his Portuguese club, I want out. So could they sell him now? Of course, they probably love to wait until the summer, until there's more money on the table. But could we see Enzo Fernandez go somewhere?
We could, but I think, and I know I say that they're finding money from somewhere, but I don't know where financial fair play just starts to kick in. I'll tell you, financial fair play kicks in when Wolves buy 3 players for $15 million a piece, and all of a sudden financial fair play are all over them. I mean, City, and they're like, not a squeak. Man United buy who you want, but so I think now it might be getting late. I haven't heard any rumblings about him. João Felix, yes. I think Chelsea were looking at him, but the most noise is around him, and whether he will or not, or whether he'll hang out, like you say, they'll string everybody along till the summer for more money. That's probably more likely.
The one thing that I wonder about with this window, I think that this window is going to be more about teams adding depth, because they're going to look at that World Cup and they're going to say, okay, the World Cup being in the middle of the season, we have to worry about overuse injuries with some of our players. So where are we? And look at the injuries we've already seen, regardless of the World Cup, right? Look at Chelsea right now. Look at Tottenham right now. Look at the tons of the teams that are there. Right, Wolves have 7 players that aren't going to play this weekend. So there just are a lot of injuries that are already there. And so I think what this window is going to be about is, I need a second winger. I need 2 wingers, right? That I can count on to back up my 2 wingers that I already have there, not just one that I feel like is a good option, that I feel like I can move things around to fit them onto the field. I need to make sure that I have 5 to 6 good midfielders that I feel comfortable going into competition with if I have a guy that needs to miss 3 to 5 weeks because of an overuse injury somewhere. To me, that's what this window is going to be about, Chris. It's going to be more about adding depth than anything else.
Yeah, it is. And again, it's those mid-range players that will be happy to be come in and be squad players and be happy of the opportunity to play in the Premier League. They're not already at the top of the top of the tree, but they want that move to the Premier League and they want to prove themselves. So yeah, you're right. I mean, the number of subs now, you just need another team, and it's the padding out unless the superstar moves.
Yeah, and I think that what we'll see with that, the byproduct of that is going to be in the summer window, tons of players move. Tons of really quality mid-grade players move, change teams throughout Europe, because the big money teams are going to be able to just go buy depth to make sure they can make the Big Four or make the top 4, be able to make Champions League, be able to play at the European level. And then they'll have to sell on some of these players once everyone comes back from injury. So that's a storyline I think to look forward to once we finish up the EPL season. Point number 5, Chris. Can Arsenal win the whole thing?
I think the only way that Arsenal will win the whole thing is if they go, it's staying on the injury topic, if they go injury-free. But if I had to say now, I would say no, because of the depth, the squad depth. Back to that. Man City have just set the bar at a completely different level to everybody else. They've got 2 first teams, basically. When Man City name the sub bench, any one of those subs could be playing on the starting 11. And if they were, you wouldn't go, oh, he's playing or he's not playing. Yeah, they make the subs. Foden comes on or Grealish comes on. There's world-class players sitting on the bench now. And I'm going about Manchester City to compare to Arsenal. Arsenal don't have that. at the moment, and we've seen an injury to Jesus, and they're struggling for a centre forward for goals. They're saying they've got to get goal, and you could pretty much go through the Arsenal team like that. So if you keep that team like Leicester did, they kept everybody healthy. The year that Leicester won it, they kept everybody healthy. They didn't struggle with injuries, and they went all the way. I think that's the only way that Arsenal are going to do it, but I can't see it happening.
I think there are three things that have to happen for Arsenal to be able to go all the way. One, you just mentioned it. They have to stay completely healthy. That's the only shot that they have. Two, Nketiah has to take another step, right? This is a guy that I looked at as young as he was and just thought, this kid is unbelievable. This young man is a future superstar. He finally kind of gets to full-time take over that role. And he has two goals in the season. He had one goal heading into that Brighton matchup around Christmas. So that was his second goal of the year. Right now, it's just everyone else is scoring but Nketiah, and he has to get back in form. And if he doesn't get back in form, I don't think Arsenal has a shot. The other thing that I think has to happen is the young guys have to play far more mature than they ever have in their careers. Because Nketiah is still 23, and Saka is still 23, I believe. And Saka's 21, right? Ramsdale's 24. That's a really young team to be counted on in a really big spot. And it's not just a matter of can you finish it in one spot, because some of these guys, we've actually, not to bring up things with Saka choked as a young guy in the Euros, right? He bottled it. So if you have a young team and you have to play 4, 5, 6 matches down the stretch with Pep and Man City breathing down your throat. Now they've got, of course, Holland, so they're virtually like the Death Star just showing up to your pitch, destroying your planet. I just wonder, can they, for 4 or 5 weeks in a row, have the right level of focus? Can the pressure not get to them if they're 3 points up and Man City just starts coming on some 7-8 match win streak like they always seem to do? I just wonder, can Arsenal's young players stand up to that pressure?
I don't think they can. And City have still got to play Arsenal twice. So there's, assuming, it's a big assumption, but assuming City win both those games, there's 6 points of your lead gone straight away. Then the pressure's on. City have been there and done it year after year with that pressure. This will be the first time for Arsenal. So put pressure with injuries, inexperience. Your money would have to be on City.
Point number 6, Chris. All right, has any team been affected by the World Cup so far?
It's hard to tell, really, because there's no teams getting a real run of consistency. And the first week back from the World Cup, you had a team or two. You think, are they going to be affected? They win. You think, oh, good, they hit the ground running. Next game, they lose. Next game, they win. So it's been like that for the last 3 or 4 games since the World Cup. You'd have to say perhaps Chelsea, but I'm not sure their overuse injuries that they're getting. Maybe Sterling did Sterling get a hamstring? I can't remember. But so with the amount of injuries, but they had a fair few going into the World Cup, you'd have to look at Chelsea, and you'd have to look at. It might be completely unrelated to the medical staff, the way they're training, but you'd have to start looking at that if you were Chelsea and seeing what was going on, because they do have so many. But it's so up and down and so unpredictable. It makes for a great season, but it's hard to know if anybody's been affected just yet, and they might not hit yet. It might be in a month or two's time.
The one thing I think we won't know when teams get hit with injuries or deal with issues from the World Cup or some type of hangover for a few weeks, because it'll be overuse injuries sometime in February or something like that. Once we get into cup play, people are playing Champions League matches and you're playing 3 times a week, that's when I think that we'll start to see who was affected by playing this World Cup in November, December, and who had time off, and maybe they end up being a lot fresher. And so I do think that's why this window is so much about adding depth and has to be so much about adding depth. It's going to make the next window incredibly compelling, I think. But I just don't think we're going to see it yet, because it's not going to be a matter of a guy's exhausted and can't play today. It's going to be a matter of in February, when there's the same number of mileage that you've had on your legs that you would have had by the end of the season. When we get to the end of February, we would get to March, we get to, beginning of April. Do we see guys run out of gas? That's the question that I have, and that's how we'll know whether or not the World Cup affected play having it during November.
Yeah, and if you think about it, it's not the actual amount of miles that they've got on their legs for many of the teams. They played some group. Well, they all played group games if they played all the game, and then a few might have played a last 32 game, a knockout game, and some might have got through beyond that. Only a handful of players have gone all the way and played all the games in the World Cup. England, not many at all. So they come back fresh as usual. But the States come back fresh. They've all had a bit of a break, quite frankly. They've had a vacation, done some training, and all's good again. But just joking aside, it's now that because of the World Cup, the Premier League have got to jam in all the games that they didn't play during the World Cup. And so, that rather than the miles, it's the intensity that they're going to have now, playing all those games at once. And then that's where you're going to see the effects, as you say, later on down the road.
That's Chris Carroll, the pride of Wolverhampton, England. Chris, tell the audience a little bit about yourself for people just joining us for the first time that maybe didn't get to hear the radio show when it was on.
Well, I don't know about pride of Wolverhampton, but I'm from Wolverhampton in England, and because you're born wherever you're born in England, you have to support that team. So I've supported Wolves all my life, and England all my life, but and played a little bit of soccer, coached a lot of soccer now over here, and a US citizen now as well. So now supporting England and the US. But between playing, a fan, coaching, soccer's been a big part of my life.
Yeah, and I'm Will West. I was a sports radio host for 16 years, fell in love with the sport of soccer not that long ago, and I just live, eat, and breathe it since then, and I absolutely love it. I'm a Tottenham supporter, so you'll hear me complain a lot. All right, point number 7, Chris. Newcastle, do you look at them as legitimate title contenders?
Perhaps not title contenders, but I like Newcastle. I like what they're doing. As a soccer club, the way they're building a team quietly, I really like what they're doing. I don't know if they can go all the way for the same reasons that we just talked about Arsenal. I don't think they've got that depth. But I think what Newcastle do have is a great team spirit, a great energy in the team. Whenever you watch them, they always look like they're playing for each other. They look like they've got a good attitude. You don't see them getting at each other and raising their arms and flapping their arms about blaming someone else. They just get on with it. And I think the combination, there's two people here I'm gonna name. Obviously Eddie Howe for being a fantastic coach, but the guy that nobody mentions is Dan Ashworth, the technical director. Dan Ashworth, wherever he's been, he's laid some unbelievable foundations for that particular club. About 10 years ago, it was Albion, West Bromwich Albion. They were on a great run. He moved there. He left there to go to the English FA, turned England's fortunes around. England hadn't got anywhere near a World Cup final or semi-final. Laid some foundations for England. They're doing well. Then he went to Brighton. Brighton now, they're seeing the rewards of what he's doing at Brighton. And he goes out and now he's at Newcastle. And he doesn't buy superstar players. Obviously, it's not just him. He talks with the manager, what the manager wants, but he'll go out and he'll get the right character. It won't be a superstar name necessarily, but he buys, and it's massively important that you buy the right characters for that group of players, because it only takes one just to throw it all out the window. And if it's so important to do the background, what guys are like, what guys have left home before. I mean, things like that, things that you don't even think about on the soccer field. Young guys leaving home for the first time, get homesick, and that can affect their play on the field. So how you treat those guys and how you find them and how you select them, gel them all together. Eddie Howe, Dan Ashworth doing a great job at Newcastle, but probably not title contenders this year.
Yeah, I don't think they're title contenders at all, but I do think they're absolutely contenders to finish in the top 4 and play in Europe next year, and I think that should be good enough. That's a heck of an achievement for Newcastle, because we're just a couple years removed from wondering whether they're going to get relegated or not, right? So the idea that just in this quick of an amount of time they could reverse their fortunes the way that they have is pretty incredible. It's weird watching them, but I like the makeup of the team. One thing I love about them is I love that Callum Wilson, Chris Wood, kind of what they do there at that position. My concern for them as well is Almer. I'm going to butcher his name, and I apologize. Almiron is at 9 goals right now. He's never had more than 4 in another season. There's no way he finishes with 18. So where's the scoring going to come from? Chris Wood's got to step up. Callum Wilson's got to step up. Somebody else has to step up and give them goals because you can't count on him to finish at 16 this year. That he's going to fall off the cliff. So where does the scoring come from for them? And this is to even finish in the top four, much less the idea of winning the title. I just don't think they have the depth. And it's weird to me watching a team that replaces quickly. They sub out they're like kind of pretty quickly. They're three of their top attacking positions. That's not something you see in soccer for the most part in this day and age, but it's something the Newcastle does, and they've been successful doing it this year.
Yeah, and I think the goals are shared around in Newcastle, and they're getting away with it. They don't need the one guy who's scoring 25 goals a season. And you mentioned Almer on there, and I'm so pleased for that guy because he came from the States. He was on fire in the States. I think it was Atlanta in the MLS, on fire. Couldn't buy a goal for a few seasons in Newcastle in the Premier League, and Grealish gave him a bit of stick, which was out of order in my opinion. And since then, since that day that Grealish gave him some stick, he's on fire, and so he's a great example of what Newcastle are about. Great attitude, work hard. No superstars, no one thinking they're all that, and the goals are being scored, they're being shared around. Yeah, they could do with a more prolific goal scorer, you're right, but I think it'll get them through, and they'll be there around the top four, as you say, come the end of the season.
Yeah, and shout out to Joseph Martinez. If we ever bring up Atlanta United, that is my dude. Okay, point number 8, Chris. Do you expect a bounce for the EPL teams that have added new managers?
Well, it's mixed, and often it must happen. It must be a thing because it's talked about, the new manager bounce. And a new manager comes in and he says the same things to the players. Doesn't matter where you've played, if you've been on the bench, what's happened in the past. I'm going to look at everybody, and everyone's got a free chance. Everyone's starting from the same level again. And every manager who goes in the changing room says that. Every new manager. Now, the three newest in the Premier League, you're looking at Villa. Excuse me. You're looking at Unai Emery at Villa, Lopetegui at Wolves, and Nathan Jones at Southampton. Now they were all near the bottom. The two of them are. Villa have had the bounce big time. And isn't it amazing that someone like Steven Gerrard, who's done everything as a player, goes to Scotland, does unbelievably well with Rangers, comes back down to the Premier League, goes to Villa, and it all falls apart. As though all of a sudden he's become a bad manager and he doesn't know what he's doing. Strange. And that's the chemistry thing that we were talking about earlier on. That's, if it's just not right, it's just not right. And maybe he made some mistakes that he can look back and be honest about himself and think, I'd do that differently. But, he wouldn't come down from Scotland and all of a sudden start doing things differently. Emery goes in, bounce big time. So Villa out of trouble now, and they're flying. Wolves, I don't know if it's a bounce or just a little bit of I don't know. They're slightly better. They look more organized. They look more enthusiastic, and they're making. I don't know. I think they're making more chances. Just can't score goals. Can't buy a goal at the moment. Wolves scored 2 the other day against Liverpool in the Cup. First time I scored 2 goals in a game for ages. So that sums Wolves up. Just look great. Can't score. And that's why centre forwards are worth a fortune. Southampton, I think they're in trouble. No bounce whatsoever. In fact, it's just they're probably worse off, and the slide just looks like it's going to continue. They pin their hopes on Nathan Jones. He came from Stoke City and Luton. With all respect to Stoke City and Luton, is he the guy to get you out of trouble with his experience? So mixed reactions there. Mixed reactions as far as bounce goes. Villa, yes. Wolves, we'll see. Southampton doesn't look like it.
Yeah, I'll actually, and apologies, Chris, for doing this, but I'll say I agree with you. Villa, yes. And they're also spending money during this window. And again, it's not superstar players, but it's quality players coming in to add depth for that squad. And you're right. It just, Gerrard, it was just the wrong chemistry, and it didn't work. Someone's going to hire him, and he's going to be incredibly successful somewhere in England or back to Scotland again or something like that. But the chemistry wasn't there. They're adding new players, so I think bounce absolutely for Villa. My problem with Wolves is because Wolves, absolutely, you're right. They look like they stay in better shape, they're more disciplined. there's an extra gear that they're giving on the pitch. My problem's this: 7 players injured right now that you're missing off of your roster, of your normal day-to-day roster. And I just don't know that they're going to have the players and the healthy roster to be able to have a bounce from having a new manager, even though the quality of play I think is better. And Southampton, you're right. That's a lost cause. Absolutely. Am I right? Like, are we wrong to just write out Southampton and it's a lost cause? I agree with you. I don't know that I necessarily understand the hire there. Also, they just don't really have a ton of talent.
They don't. And once you start going down that hole, it's so hard to climb out of, because the manager comes into the changing room every time and he's thinking, what can I say now? I want to say the same thing and try and say it in a different way. You can do this, guys. Stay confident. You're all pros. Da, 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 da. And in the end, the guys just, they know, they're thinking it's the same thing, just said in a different way. And you need, here's my doubts about Wolves as well, is that they technically, and again, all these players can play. Technically, they can all play. Wolves look fantastic. For 2/3 of the field, they look really good. They could knock it about. But you wonder if they've got that grit and determination in them, because it just, you need some types of players. You need 2 or 3 players in your team who are who are willing just to, old-fashioned terms, get stuck in and dig yourself and scrap yourself out of a fight out of trouble.
All right, point number 9.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, Will. I was going to say, and you look around, and there aren't too many of those, So I think that's what gives me the doubts about Wolves as well.
All right, point number 9, Chris. We do this every single week for those of you who have never heard who never did get a chance to hear the radio show. Number 9 is our target man. One player you're targeting to have a big match week this weekend.
I was just talking about guys who scrap and fight and are up for a battle. And Alexander Mitrovic, I love him. I love watching him play. He's absolutely fantastic. Talk about no frills, but what a player! And it didn't go right for him first time in the Premier League, and his coach didn't like him last year. This year he's doing great for him and for Fulham. Respect to Fulham, he's got 11 goals this season. If he doubles that, if he's in the 20s, that's it. I mean, which team wouldn't want him? So I think he'll be on somebody's radar if he keeps up the way he's going. But I love him. He gives absolutely everything. He must be an absolute pain to play against.
Yeah, one player that I'll target to have a big match week this weekend, as a Spurs fan, I'll say it's Eddie Nketiah, because I think that he started getting things turned around, getting that goal against Brighton. Also, who among us has not scored against Spurs as of late? So not only will I say Nketiah scores the opening goal of the match, because everyone scores the opening goal of every match against Tottenham right now. I say that as a Spurs supporter, but we have to be realistic. And honestly, I think Nketiah, I think he's going to come alive. He's too talented a player, too good of a player, surrounded by too much talent right now, and they have stayed healthy, it seems like. Arsenal have, especially on the front end, right, in the attacking side. So I think Nketiah is going to have a big game against Spurs, and I think he ends up getting a goal. Point number 10, Chris, biggest storyline for the EPL for the second half of the season.
I think it's going to be Haaland and how many he scores, how many goals he scores. I mean, what a player. He's a machine, isn't he? And the current record at the moment for goals in a Premier League season, 34, shared by Alan Shearer and Ashley Cole. He's got 21. Haaland has at the moment 21, and he's there, and City aren't halfway yet. They're almost halfway. So I mean, you double him up, 42 goals, absolutely blow it away, the record. And he'll be taking a record from 2 legends really in English soccer, Shearer, Cole, around for years, and to come in first year and score. To be scoring the way he is, I mean, you expect him to get 1. You're not surprised if he gets 2, and he's almost not raising an eyebrow now if he scores a hat trick, because he's incredible. He's incredible, and he scores any kind of goal he can score. I think it's going to be him smashing records.
What does he have to do if he wins the EPL and breaks that record this year? How quickly is he kind of replacing Messi and Ronaldo as the best soccer player in the world, period, point blank, nobody's batting an eye?
I think if he keeps scoring at the rate he is, and City win the Champions League, I think City got to win the Champions League for a few of them, for Pep and for the club and what have you. He wins the Champions League. once or twice. I mean, if we're talking about overtaking those guys, if he's scoring the way he's scoring, he's got to get the Ballon d'Or. Winning the World Cup might be tricky for him, but it's not always come down to that. There lies that argument, that old argument. But yeah, as a club for his club, he could eclipse them. He absolutely can.
All right, so I'll say the biggest storyline for the second half of the EPL season is going to be who stays healthy. Because if everybody else deals with injuries, if every team's dealing with injuries just across the board because of overuse, because of what happened having the World Cup when we had the World Cup, the condensed number of matches that we're going to see, then the answer is City just runs away with this thing by 19 points or something like that by the time we get to May. And if someone stays healthy, maybe they can challenge City in this thing. But can Arsenal stay healthy? That's going to be a big question. What happens? Because I do think health also, you know how the EPL is. It's all throughout the table. There's where you see the storylines. It's not just at the top, mostly because City's run away with things for so many years, or repeatedly over the last few years.
Yeah.
So I think who stays healthy to make the top four? Who stays healthy to not get relegated? It's going to be about injuries, and that's going to be a really boring storyline, I think, for a lot of fans, but I think it may make for compelling matches because we're going to see a lot of young guys probably get to play earlier. I know that some guys that they run some second, third tier teams that are in England right now, and they're seeing loans get guys that have been on loan that they thought were going to be there all season. Bam, yank back because teams in the championship are dealing with injuries. Teams at the Premier League level are dealing with injuries. It's just something that you're going to have to deal with. And so how do those teams, who's built for it, who's not built for it, that to me is going to be the biggest storyline for the upcoming year, Chris.
Yeah, well, I think the storyline, you say it might be a boring one, but I think what goes along with that is the race for the top four and is the fight for relegation, which is going to be really this year. It's looking like it's going to be exciting. The top four looks like it's right now, perhaps one of eight. There's some big names, not even close to that top four at the moment. Relegation, likewise, I think all the way up to something like 13th. Everybody's in with a shot of going down. There's no one's that comfortable. Or there's a lot of clubs that aren't comfortable anyway. And like you say, City could well run away with it with the depth of their squad. They could be sitting pretty by March.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, look, let's be honest. If we were betting, that would probably be the way to put your money. All right, final point, Chris. Point number 11. Your match of the week. Your upset pick of the week.
Some good games again. Every weekend throws up some good games. But my match of the week, I always love the Man United derby, the Manchester derby. Used to be called the Man United derby because City never won one. But yeah, the Manchester derby. I've followed soccer for a long time, decades, 70s, 80s, and way back. It was how many Man United are going to win by. I bet Man City saw this fixture coming and it was like, oh man, here we go again, bragging rights to United. Of course, it's all changed. United are still still winning in the stats. I think they've won 70 odd of the derbies to City's 50 something. But ever since Sir Alex Ferguson called them the noisy neighbours, they've made a bit of noise and they've obviously favourites going into this game now, Man City. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to that game, and this will be a good measure to see how Manchester United are doing because they'll obviously raise the game, and it'll be interesting to watch different styles also.
Yeah, your upset pick of the week.
My upset of the week, I think. Chelsea are obviously in trouble, and Chelsea are 10th. It's not much of an upset if you look at the positions in the league. Chelsea 10th, Palace are 12th. Chelsea v Palace with Zaha. Chelsea are always good. Palace are always good for a goal. Not just with him, with the way Palace play. Palace are strange. They're an enigma team because they can be fantastic one week, next week not great. If they're on it against Chelsea, they could cause Chelsea a lot of trouble. They're away at Chelsea, and I could see that's my upset of the week. I could see Palace, if they're on form, putting Chelsea away, especially with the way Chelsea are at the moment.
Objectively, as a Spurs fan, I will say it's the North London Derby that is the match of the week coming up this weekend. Tottenham against Arsenal. Tottenham cannot afford to lose another match. Arsenal, if they could get this win against Tottenham, my goodness, would they be riding high, especially if they can get a little help from United and kind of build a little bit of a lead against City. But I think, to me, the hate that's involved in that one, I absolutely love. I have many a friend that are an Arsenal supporter, and I will speak to literally none of them all week long as we get ready for this. But that's my match of the week, but it's also my upset pick of the week. Any Spurs fan will tell you we finally have the board and finally have Levy on board with spending money during a transfer window. What's going to happen is they're going to beat Arsenal. They're going to beat them like 2-0 or something like that, 3-1, something of that ilk, and spend almost no money during this window. Conte is going to be beside himself. Kane's going to go somewhere else. The world goes round and round. Bob's your uncle, however you want to say it. We all know, every Spurs fan knows this is what happens. Spurs beat Arsenal this weekend, and they spend almost nothing because the board thinks that they have gotten the ship righted. It's just the way of the world, Chris.
You've seen that story before, haven't you? You've seen it happen so many times. And you're right. It's Levy's get out of jail card, isn't it? He knows. Beat Arsenal, everything's good. Don't need to spend anything. It's spot on.
That's exactly the way it'll go down. Thank you guys so much for watching our show today. Again, next Monday, 3 o'clock, 3:05, we'll get the show started again. 2 years we did sports radio. We've taken this onto YouTube now, and so excited to do that. Like, subscribe. You'll see all of our content starting 11. Will West, Chris Carroll.